It's time for us to return home and go back to the original intention of what God had in mind when He created us. This is a season and a time in life when we all have to show up authentically. We all have to, I think there needs to be a degree of vulnerability. And I get it. I know that out in the social media world, everyone wants to put on this image that everything is so perfect and everything is going so well, when the truth of the matter is we all have our mess that we deal with. I don't even know what title I'm going to give this episode, but I think I'm going to call it something about a call to return home or returning home. I've never felt so much in my spirit the urge of just going back to the foundation of what God had in mind, going back to that blueprint. You all, people are so all over the place, it's just not even funny. And we have to be authentic, truthful. We have to have those real conversations, even with ourselves. And we have to stop being scattered and all over the place and go back to home position. Let me explain where I'm going with all of this. Many of you are aware, only by God's grace, I was asked to keynote a conference that was held in Houston, Texas, and it was absolutely amazing. Hopefully, by the time this recording is up, I'll have some pictures that I can insert into this recording. Otherwise, whenever they send me the master file, I'll make sure that I upload, if not the entire speech, at least parts of it. But I was asked to go to Houston, Texas, and it was a phenomenal, phenomenal opportunity to be able to fly there. And they were so wonderful, such amazing people. Oh my God, I can't say enough good things about them. I even had people from the Unlocking Greatness community, some of my mentors come into town, and that just really just had me in tears. And hopefully I can get some pictures up so you all can see. But anyway, let me stay on point. Is it was phenomenal. And of all topics they gave me, they said, Z, and mind you, this was a conference for a lot of professional women. I think at least half were business owners, but a lot of professional. These sisters had it together. I'll put it like that. And when I got the invitation, and I'm just going to be very vulnerable with you all because I don't think it helps to hold back any details. I want you all to get the gist of this. At first, I thought, wow, I've had seasons in my life when I was doing even so much better, and why at this point am I called to speak at such a conference? When I want to put it the best way. You know how there are moments in life when you're just at the tip top of your game, and then there are moments where you're figuring some things out, and there's moments where you're somewhere in the middle. So that's kind of what I was feeling like. Okay, this is interesting. They gave me a topic on the beauty and bouncing back. That was my topic, and I thought, man, God, that is absolutely amazing. That of all topics, that's what they want me to speak on. And then they wanted me to leave a master class titled, I think it was titled, "The Art of Letting Go." And one of the things that God placed in my heart, I said, God, you know that I'm going through my seasons and things in life right now as well. And God placed in my heart, if I wanted them to just have a motivational speaker, I would have had them choose someone else. That's why I chose you. So just kind of keep that in mind, as we're walking through this podcast episode. So anyway, go to the conference. God tremendously blessed it. Just from morning to late at night, and wonderful, fruitful conversations. The conference was just amazing, and God spoke through me with delivering a message about the beauty and bouncing back. And in fact, I talked a little bit about how things don't look beautiful up front. It looks like um, it looks like a rough diamond. And I think I did a podcast episode on this, the one previous to this, but you can't even tell that the situation you're going through is a beautiful situation because nothing about it looks beautiful at all. And in fact, I think that's kind of how I started the speech off, is that how dare we call it beautiful? What's beautiful about when you're going through things, for example, in your marriage or in your finances or with your children or whatever? And I can just sort of sense the people in the audience kind of leaning in a little bit more and a little bit more. And I just started to really be very vulnerable and very, truthful with them about seasons and things that I've gone through in life. And what everyone realized is we all need each other. We all need to show up and be authentic with each other, and be truthful with each other, and show our scars before the world so that others can find beauty within themselves. And I think that's how I started the speech off, because before I went up there, I don't even like calling it a speech now that I think about it, the message. God said to me, I want you to reveal your scars so that they can find beauty within themselves. Because there was a few things I was questioning if I should share or not. He said, reveal your scars so that they can find beauty within themselves. I won't walk through the whole lesson or the whole speech that I gave, because hopefully I can get a chance to upload it really soon when they send it to me. But I'll just say this. you all, this is a call back to home. The way that I ended it, and this was totally in the spirit God gave it to me, and the beauty in bouncing back. At the end, I told them, you know what, it's really not bouncing back. I don't want to go back to the same position that I was in before. You can't put new wine in old wineskin. It's really bouncing higher. And the bounce really is the going higher really is in each circumstance that we deal with in life. And when we come out of it on the other side, God is calling us all back home. It's just a step closer to home positioning. Think about it. Every season, everything that we've gone through, and you all know I'm kind of thinking through my son right now because this is around the time of his birthday, not long after we had lost him. But every cycle that I've noticed I've gone through, it's as if we're taking a step back closer to home. And when I say home, a step closer back to that original home base. It's like being in the presence of God. It's like that original intention, that original blueprint of what he had in mind when he made us. What does that look like when you go back to home base? That's why I'm titling this. I think I'm going to call it Returning Home. So I'm going to skip over everything that I said at that conference because hopefully I can get the video up and you can watch it. And I want to touch on one little piece that I did talk about there, which is in the book of Genesis. Because God has been leading me back to, we have to go back to home base. We have to go back to the foundation. We have to go back to studying out the blueprint. And I said, okay, so if we are heirs of God, because I talked a little bit about being heirs of God in Romans 8:17, I believe it is. If we are heirs of God, then shouldn't we be studying out how he did things and who he is? And so I had everyone turn to Genesis 1. You all can turn to Genesis really quickly. This had never been revealed to me. It came to me in the spirit. So, I guess it's possible other people may have talked about it or seen it this way, but this completely came to me in the spirit. And I want to talk about this. In Genesis chapter 1, this is what God was revealing to me. He said, go back and read Genesis because we're returning back home. And I went to Genesis and I noticed in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, now I'm reading from an NIV version. It says, in the beginning, God created. And I looked and I says, okay, so he started off creating. And then, of course, it's referring to the heavens and the earth. And then I looked in verse 3. And then verse 3 says, and God said, he said something. And this is referring to the light, right? And then if you go on down in the verse, it says, and there it was. In other words, and it was so. That was in verse 3. And then if you go and you look in verse 6 or so in your Bible, it's going to say, and God said, and this is referring to the water. And you read on in that, and it's going to talk about, and it was so. And then you go on into like verse 9, and it says, and God said, and this is referring to the dry ground. And then it says, and it was so. And then in verse 11, and God said, referring to the vegetation. And it was so. Then in verse 14, it talks about, and God said, referring to the moon and the stars and all that he created. And it was so. Verse 20, talking about the creatures, the birds of the air. And God said, and it was so. Verse 24, he's talking about the creatures that moves on the ground. And God said, and it was so. And it was, I can't explain it, but it was as if the words began to completely jump off the page to me. And I thought, okay. Then I got to verse 26, and it was something amazing I saw. It said, and God said. Well, what did he say this time in verse 26? Let's read it together. Let us make mankind in our image. And he goes on to talk about in our likeness. And in verse 27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. So you guys know I look at things black and white. When I look at this in black and white, I just go all the way back to the beginning. And I says, okay, so let me start over. In the beginning, God created. Okay. God has given me the ability to imagine. He's given me the ability to think. He's given me the ability to, in essence, I can use the word loosely create, right? He's given me the ability to imagine, to come up with things, to come up with ideas, to even dream of a better life. You get my point? And then when I follow his blueprint and I'm looking at in verse 3, in verse 6, in verse 9, in verse 11, verse 14, verse 20, verse 24, verse 26, all the way up until the part about me, every single time it's saying, and God said, and it was so. And God said, and it was so. And God said, and it was so. And then it's as if he comes to us and he says, so what are you saying? So now I made you in my image. You're just like me. I made you in my likeness. So what should that mean for you? Oh, and this is my revelation. okay, he's my father. And if I'm to imitate my father, he created. First of all, he had order, which is wonderful. He didn't just sporadically get out there doing things. Wow, he created. Okay. All right, let me go back to that diamond story. Wait. I know it looks this way. I know my circumstances looking kind of funny and looking this and that way. But hold on. I remember the stories in the Bible when the widow didn't have much and and she only had a little bit of oil and I remember and you start thinking through verses in the Bible and stuff. Then it's like, whoa, wait. Maybe this is a diamond. Now, if you all don't know what I'm talking about at all, listen to my previous podcast episode because I did an entire episode, something around the subject of diamonds, because I went to Arkansas to some diamond mining field, and we had to take a class on don't you overlook these diamonds. You may think it's just a dry rock, but you got to understand diamonds are brownish and yellowish in color. They're oddly shaped. They're dirty, they're greasy, they're oily. It looks nothing like a diamond. And we actually had to be trained on what a diamond looks like before they would even let us out in the field to go searching for diamonds. You can go back and listen to that podcast episode and refer to it. But the point is, we may be looking at our situation and thinking, but there's nothing good about this. Like, this is not a good situation, so you just don't understand, right? And we can be standing on diamonds and not even know it. And I think I said that in my speech when I was in Houston, Texas. There was just so many people in the room crying. They were just like, you just don't understand how much this opened my eyes. But you can be on diamonds and not even know it. God made us in his image. So we're to go back to home position. Home position. And home position for me, and this is where I'm steering the entire Unlocking Greatness community. We're changing everything around so that beginning of the year, we all are collectively making a movement together. We're walking into home position. We're going back into home position, back into studying out in the beginning, back into what is this foundation? Why am I here, God? What am I supposed to be doing? What was your original intention you had in mind when you made me? What is the business idea you've given me? How do I deploy my gifts to the world? What am I supposed to be doing in this season with my finances or with my family or just at this stage in life? Let me go back and re-examine this blueprint and let me address things and look at things the way my father looks at things. Let me not leave any diamonds around. Let me have order in my life. Let me go back to the original intention of what he had in mind when he made me. Let me go back to that foundation, to the original intention. There's a beautiful book by Dr. Miles Monroe you all should consider getting. I believe it's called The Spirit of Leadership or something like that. Someone had asked me to read that book after reading my book, Necessary, because I have a story in my book about being a lion. And they said, Z, this reminds me so much of a book by Dr. Miles Monroe. And I had never read anything by him by the time I read my book, just to be clear. But I love in The Spirit of Leadership, he talks something like that about going back to the blueprint. I forget the words he used, the manufacturer's guide or something like that, he says. And I remember when I read that not too long ago, and I thought, wow, he explains beautifully what I've been trying to explain that's been in my spirit. Is going back and let me study the manufacturer's guide. How about we go back to the blueprint? So I know this message is a little all over the place, but you all, this is a call to return back home. God created, and then he spoke a thing. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. What are we speaking to ourselves? What are we speaking to ourselves? How are we treating us? We are so powerful in the spirit. The very words that we say have an impact with what happens in this world and with what's attracted to us because we're made in the image of our Father. And God said, verse 3, and it was so. Verse 6, and God said, and it was so. Verse 9, and God said, and it was so. Verse 11, God said, and it was so. Verse 14, God said, and it was so. Verse 20, God said, and it was so. Verse 24, the creatures that crawl around on the ground. God said, and it was so. And then he says, now you go do what I do. So what are we speaking into existence? What are we proclaiming in the spirit? That's probably a better way of saying it. How are we walking as heirs? Let me share with you all a little piece that I wasn't planning on sharing, but I just think it's important that everybody knows this. When I was done giving that speech in Texas, and I had to lead like a masterclass workshop later that day as well. And again, the people were just, oh my God, beyond phenomenal. They had people flying in from different parts of Africa, from Dubai, like just from all over. I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. This is absolutely amazing. Um, The one of the head leaders of the program called me when it was over, and she's such a wonderful woman. Oh my God! And just to thank me again, and and she just wonderful, had wonderful things to say. And I said to her, and she may have been surprised by me saying this. I told her I had an amazing time. I said, "You want to know what happened when I got back to my room?" And she said, "What happened?" And I said, "I cried." And she said, "Oh, what happened? Did somebody?" I said, "No, no, no, everything was wonderful." I said, "I cried." I said, "The reason I cried," I said, "is because," and I wasn't even going to share this, but I shared this inside of my mentorship program, and they get it because we've been talking about some things, and especially with the ones that showed up in person. You talk about having the best time and the most unified bonding time. We hugged each other so long, we didn't even want to let each other go. But I said, when I got back into my room, I said, I cried. I said, I cried because I said, I went up there on stage. I did exactly what God asked me to do. And I poured and I gave and I revealed my scars, right? And you all, again, you'll watch the video whenever I put it up. And the people were greatly encouraged. And she even said people were just crying and they were just so moved, which is totally the grace of God. The glory don't go to me, it goes to God. And I said, and I went back, I said, because it's almost like I got back in my room and it's like, okay, now you're back in your reality. You still have stuff that you're working on constantly that you're dealing with. You poured out. And if anyone has ever given a sermon or a lesson or prepared to train and teach someone, you let out such there's a minister that used the word girth. I don't know exactly if that's the right word, but you let so much out of you that it almost as if it depletes you, if that makes any sense. And I got back in my room and I thought, wow, God, I'm dealing with things and have things in my life. And thank you for blessing me to pour out to them. But whoa, okay, now I'm back into my reality of all of the tough decisions I've got to make and things going on in my life. Does that make sense? And I sat there and I actually just cried. Actually ended up having to call someone. I called a lady that's very dear to me. She was one of the speakers inside of my program, inside of Unlocking Greatness Community. An amazing woman getting her doctorate in spiritual formation. She's phenomenal. And she told me, she says, Z, that is totally normal. And she kind of, what's the right phrase I should use? Just really helped me through that situation. She said, Z, you've been going through so much. And she said, Z, you forget you flew down for this conference on the day of your son's birthday that just passed away. You didn't even have time to really grieve that. Like you ran to the gravesite, you almost missed your flight getting there, right? And she says, and so you're going through your stuff and you're still grieving, but you're giving while you're grieving. And so she really helped me to see that. Now you may be thinking, well, why are you sharing this part about crying and why would you share that with the woman? First of all, God has been placing in my heart in these seasons of our lives, we have got to show up and be so authentic and so vulnerable with each other. Now, you need to be wise in what you share. You don't need to be sharing all your business with everybody. But we need to reveal the scars and show the true us, show what's going on. Let others hug us. Let people put their arms around us. Get the help that we need. We don't have to act like superheroes, like we have it all together. Does that make sense? So when I shared this with the lady that called me from the program, I want to be careful to not use her name and respect privacy. Her response was so incredibly amazing. So I won't share what she said, but I'll just say this in a nutshell. She was able to completely relate, completely. And she even opened up and shared some things. And I won't go into that because I maintain privacy. But we end up talking for like another almost 15, 20 minutes, really bonding, and this is a woman that put the whole thing together, really going deep and bonding with each other. And it was almost as if it was this sisterhood. I'm having chills as I'm talking right now. It's almost as if this is sisterhood because we're coming together, we're being authentic, we're sharing our struggles, the ups and downs, and the victories. So I realize this message kind of spent off into two parts. On one end, I'm talking about you all, it's time for us to go back to that foundation, to that blueprint, returning back home. That's what Unlocking Greatness is all about. And in this new year coming up, that's all we're doing. The whole community, everyone coming together, we're returning back home, walking through the journey together, holding hands, walking through it together. What does returning home mean? Let's show up in the image of God. Let's respond and do things the way that God did it. He created, he spoke a thing, it was done. He had systems, he's had an order in place in life. So my goal for me and for anyone that's a member inside the Unlocking Greatness community is this is a call to return back home. And now the second piece to this is the reason I brought up that story I just shared, that personal story, which I know a lot of people wouldn't share that. I get it, but it doesn't matter what people think about me, right? Is As we go on this journey of returning back home, you all in this season of our lives, especially now in this world, we have to be authentic and real and vulnerable with each other and get help when we need it. You could not have told me from being up there on the stage and all these spotlights on you, you got all these people flying from all around, and you're giving your heart and soul, right? That I would go back in my own hotel room and cry and be on my knees crying, right? And then I had to reach out to some friends and get some help myself. And they've done nothing but wrap their loving arms around me, right? You get my point? I want to touch up on some of the members that did come to the event, and I hope to put some pictures up if they give me permission to post some of the pictures in here. Otherwise, I'll just have to put them inside of the Unlocking Greatness community. It meant the world to me. The moment I walked off that stage, I went and I sat down at the table and I began to break down and I was just praying. One, because it was just such, I can't explain, it was such a fire that I was feeling in my spirit. But also, I was grieving the loss of my son, and just it was as if it all was coming full circle once I got off the stage and walked to my chair. And all of a sudden I felt someone grab me tightly and hug me around my waist. And it was one of the members in the Unlocking Greatness community. And then all of a sudden, I felt like my afro go down. I felt like someone coming from behind me, like almost like cratering my head and my afro and wrapping her arm around this part of my shoulder. And there was another member, that came into town. I just literally, I can't explain it, but to be with members and I know I'm drifting. You guys just bear with me. Many people know the Unlocking Greatness community. We meet online. So that was my first time, even though they've been with me, I think one of them for over a year. First time us coming together and connecting and touching each other. Can you imagine the grip that they had on me? And then they're crying and I'm crying. And they're like, Z, my life has changed and I've learned so much inside of this community. I've grown so much. And, one of them was like, I started my business and you guys gave me the hope. I went to a new city and I was scared, but I got my business going and you guys walked me through it all the way. And now it's like, and we're holding and we're just crying. Like, and then, but here's the thing. I felt the support and I felt the love. And I said, this is what life is about. We don't have to show up and try to be the strong ones for everyone. Sometimes we need to let ourselves get the hugs because they were there to comfort me in that moment. And we're just hugging each other and holding each other so tightly. I think we were together until late that night. We even went into a restaurant and had coffee and hot chocolate and whatever later because we didn't even want to part with each other. Then I got to meet some of their family. One of them had their husband come into town. And it was just absolutely amazing. When I got back to my room, and as I told you before, I started, bawling even more. And even on the plane heading back, I just thought, we need each other. One, we need each other to be able to help each other out and grow spiritually and grow and learn. And, we need to learn from God and imitate who He is. But we need each other. There's so much fakeness that's out there in social media in the world. And I know on the outside everything looks so good, but the truth of the matter is we all are going through our things. And that's why we need each other. You're not a weaker person because you're going through your stuff. You can be preaching or teaching something on stage or even mentoring other people and still going through some of the same stuff. It's normal. It's totally normal. And when I met with the members in the Unlocking Greatness community, when we had our live workshop session after that, I think I met with that was a meeting we had with the entrepreneurs. I opened up and I shared this with them. I'm reading a book. I wrote a book. Wrote a book. I'm reading a book called Rising Strong by Brene Brown. I'd never really read anything by her, but the lady that called me that night, she said, "I want you to get this book and start reading it." Now, you all know I don't watch TV. I don't listen to the radio, so I read a book like in a minute. So I got the book, and within 2 days, 2 or so days, it was read. Um, but I was reading a book. I lost my train of thought just that quick. But anyway, oh yeah, the book by Brene Brown. I was reading this book, and in that she talks about one of the ways to disarm any type of shame or embarrassment. If you feel like, man, here I am teaching this, but I'm going through it. She said it's to expose it, is to get it out. And I thought, oh, that's good because that reminds me of the scriptures about bringing to the light to the darkness. So when I met with them, when we had our entrepreneur session, I'm going to wrap this up, you guys. I know I'm rambling a little bit. I shared about it. I shared about the event, right? And then I shared about what happened when I got back in the room and what I was going and what I was feeling and some of the shame that I was feeling. Like, man, God has placed me in a position to help these amazing women from all around the world, but look at some of the things I'm dealing with. And any ounce of shame or embarrassment or guilt or whatever that I was feeling, when I tell you it ran out the room, it had to get itself away from me because it was exposed to the light. Every single person in that group, I kid you not, I should say almost, I don't want to exaggerate, was either in tears or started talking and started sharing. And we had one of the best sessions we had ever said. They said, Z, this is what I'm talking about. I'm not interested in being in an environment where everyone puts on the front like everything is so beautiful. I want to see the scars, the good days and the bad days. I want to be in an environment where I can see someone going through things, but still pushing through and still leading by example. This is what I want, the authenticity. Now, I'm saying this, it's not a bragging tool for me because there's really nothing to brag on with this. I'm saying this as a gentle, loving challenge to you all. It's time to return back to home position. What did God have in mind when He made you? What is it He want you to do in your life? How do I imitate my Father? How do I show up authentically? How do I show up vulnerably with wisdom, by the way, with wisdom? How do I show up authentically as me? That original intention God have in mind. And watch what begins to happen when you do that, my brothers and sisters. Watch what begins to happen when you let that ego out the door. When you repent of ego or pride or trying to have this mask on. And I'm not talking down to anyone. I'm just making a point. Watch what happens when you return home and the real you comes forward. So I love you all. I know this was a little all over the place, but I pray you all have been greatly encouraged. This is a call to return home. For those of you who are not members in the Unlocking Greatness community, I greatly encourage you all to join at this time. If you thought this year we just had was a phenomenal year, or let me just say a great year in terms of learning and growing and development, right? Watch what's going to happen in this next year. Because when we return back to home position and you got people coming together in perfect unity, watch what begins to happen and how we begin to grow and thrive in life. I love you all. This is Z with Unlocking Greatness Podcast. This is a call, I should say, to return home. Love you all.